I learned that day that rich people can buy roses by the truckload, but they cannot buy the hands gentle enough to keep them alive. My name was Lily Harper, and at 24 years old, I knew more about soil than silver, more about rain than champagne, and more about keeping my head down than any woman should have to learn. That morning, I was on my knees beside the white rose beds behind Kane Manor, pressing damp earth around the roots while 100 people prepared to celebrate a marriage that looked less like love and more like a business merger wearing flowers. The estate stretched across 30 acres outside Chicago, all black iron gates, marble steps, glass walls, and gardens so perfect they seemed afraid of themselves. My work dress was faded green. My boots were muddy. My gloves had holes in 2 fingers. Inside the manor, women in silk laughed under crystal lights, while men in tailored suits spoke quietly into phones and pretended the whole world had not been built on favors. I was tying a young rose stem to a bamboo stake when I heard the first laugh. Not happy. Sharp. The kind meant to cut without leaving fingerprints. "She is just the garden girl," a woman said behind me. I did not turn around. I knew better. People like that preferred an audience, and I refused to give her my face. I kept my hands in the dirt and my back straight. Another woman giggled. Dominic Kane's engagement party, and they let the help crawl around in front of the guests? "Maybe it is part of the aesthetic," the first woman said. "Poor girl among rich flowers." I pushed soil around the root ball with my thumb. Slow. Careful. The rose did not deserve a rough hand just because people did. My mother used to tell me that dignity was not the same as pride. Pride needed witnesses. Dignity stayed with you even when no one looked. I held on to that as their heels clicked away along the stone path. The party was for Dominic Kane, the man whose name made waiters lower their voices and businessmen smile too quickly. I had worked at Kane Manor for 8 months and had seen him only from a distance. Tall, dark-haired, white skin, black suits, gray eyes that turned a room quiet before he spoke. People called him a hotel owner, a private investor, a generous donor. Other people called him something else when they thought the walls were not listening. Mafia boss. I did not know what was true. I only knew his roses were thirsty and his staff paid on time, and my mother's medicine did not wait for moral clarity. By noon, the garden had filled with guests moving between white tents and champagne trays. The engagement announcement would happen at 5. Dominic Kane was expected to accept Vanessa Whitmore, daughter of a family powerful enough to make even the Kane staff nervous. I had seen Vanessa that morning through the glass doors, wearing cream satin and diamonds before sunset, smiling like the world had been trained to move out of her way. I was carrying a bucket of cut stems toward the side entrance when I noticed the elderly woman near the east hedge. She stood alone beneath the hard June sun, one hand pressed to her chest, the other gripping the stone edge of a fountain. Everyone else was looking toward the terrace where photographers were arranging flowers. No one saw her sway. I dropped the bucket so fast water splashed over my boots. "Ma'am?" I called softly, walking toward her. "Are you all right?" Her eyes found mine, unfocused and frightened. She was small, white-haired, dressed in pale blue, with a string of pearls at her throat and a tremor in her fingers. "I was trying to find the shade," she whispered. Everything became too bright. I did not ask who she was. I did not think about whether I was allowed to touch a guest. I only slipped off my gloves, offered my arm, and guided her toward the bench beneath the old magnolia tree. "Sit here. Breathe with me. In through your nose, out slowly. You are safe." Her hand clutched mine with surprising strength. I took the water bottle from my apron pocket, opened it, and held it out. Small sips. She obeyed like a child pretending not to be scared. I sat beside her until her breathing steadied, shielding her face from the sun with my own body. "You are kind," she said after a while. I looked down at the dirt beneath my nails. "No, ma'am. I am just here." She studied me with eyes that seemed clearer now. Sometimes that is the rarest kind of kindness. I smiled because I did not know what else to do. Above us, on the second-floor balcony behind the dark glass, I felt someone watching. When I looked up, Dominic Kane stood there in a black suit, still as a shadow at noon, his gray eyes fixed not on the party, not on his future bride, but on me. Dominic Kane looked away first, but the feeling of being seen stayed on my skin long after his shadow left the balcony glass. I told myself it meant nothing. Men like him watched everything. Gardens. Gates. Guests. People who moved too quickly. People who stayed too quiet. A girl in muddy boots beside an elderly woman was only another detail in a house built on control. Still, my hands shook when I picked up the bucket again. The woman in blue touched my wrist before I could leave. "What is your name, child?" "Lily Harper." Her expression changed so slightly I almost missed it. A breath held too long. A memory waking behind her eyes. "Harper," she repeated. "Yes, ma'am." "Your father worked with roses?" The question struck me harder than it should have. My father had been gone since I was 7, leaving behind a rusted truck, a box of seed packets, and stories my mother never finished. "He did," I said carefully. "Before I was old enough to remember much." The woman nodded, but her fingers tightened around mine. "Good hands run in families." Before I could ask what she meant, a staff member hurried across the lawn, face pale with relief. "Mrs. Kane, there you are." Mrs. Kane. The name landed in my stomach like a dropped stone. I had been sitting under a magnolia tree, giving bottled water to Eleanor Kane, Dominic Kane's grandmother, the woman whose portrait hung above the grand staircase. I stood too fast, wiping my dirty hands on my apron like that could erase every informal word I had spoken. "I am sorry. I did not know." Eleanor Kane looked up at me, amused and tired. That is why it mattered. The staff member helped her toward the terrace, but she glanced back once. Not at the roses. At me. By 3 o'clock, the house had become louder. Florists moved through the halls with silver vases. A string quartet tuned near the ballroom. Guests drifted indoors because the sky had turned white with heat, and the glass walls reflected their diamonds until the whole manor seemed to glitter without warmth. I was told to bring fresh gardenias to the east sitting room. Quickly, the house manager said, handing me a tray. "And do not linger. Miss Whitmore is already upset about the floral balance." I carried the tray through the side door, past polished floors where my boots squeaked softly despite the cloth covers tied around them. Every mirror reminded me I did not belong inside. Dirt still marked one sleeve. A strand of hair had escaped my braid. My dress smelled faintly of roses and sun. In the east sitting room, Vanessa Whitmore stood before a wall of framed Kane family photographs, holding a champagne flute she had barely touched. She was beautiful in the way knives are beautiful under light, exact, polished, cold. Her cream satin dress fit like it had been negotiated. 2 women hovered near her, laughing too softly. Vanessa saw me in the mirror and smiled. "There she is." I stopped near the flower table. "The gardenias, ma'am." "Set them there." She pointed to a low table beside a velvet ring box. I noticed it because everyone would have noticed it. Deep green velvet. Gold clasp. Positioned under a lamp as if it wanted to be admired. I placed the tray several feet away from it. Vanessa watched my hands. "Careful. That box holds more history than you will ever touch." Heat rose in my face, but I kept my voice even. "I am only here for the flowers." One of her friends laughed. "Of course you are." Vanessa stepped closer. "Dominic has a weakness for strays. His grandmother does too. Do not mistake kindness for invitation." I looked at the gardenias instead of her eyes. White petals bruised easily. So did poor girls in rich rooms if they answered wrong. "I understand my job." "Do you?" Her smile thinned. "Then remember it." I turned to leave, but a sound stopped me. The ring box clicked open behind me. Not loud. Just enough. I did not turn around. I walked out with empty hands, down the hall, through the side door, back into the sunlight where I could breathe. At 4:30, the announcement guests were called into the ballroom. I was in the service corridor rinsing soil from pruning shears when a scream cut through the manor. Not fear. Performance. I knew the difference before I knew the reason. A minute later, the house manager appeared at the corridor door, face gray. "Lily," she said, and there was pity in her voice now, which frightened me more than anger. "Miss Whitmore says the Kane heirloom ring is missing." My hands went still under the running water. "What does that have to do with me?" She looked at my apron, my boots, my cheap dress, and then looked away. She says you were the last person near the box. I wanted to say she was lying, but poor girls learn early that truth sounds different depending on who can afford the room. The house manager did not touch me. She did not accuse me with words. She only stepped aside and let two security men appear behind her in dark suits with polite faces and empty eyes. Miss Harper, one said, "We need you to come with us." My first thought was my mother's medicine on the kitchen counter, 3 bottles in a row, each one more expensive than the last. My second thought was my father's old rule, never run when you have done nothing wrong, because guilty people love making honest people look afraid. I dried my hands on a towel and followed them. The hallway to the ballroom felt endless. Every step carried me deeper into glass, gold, and judgment. The string quartet had stopped playing. The guests had gathered beneath the chandeliers, champagne flutes paused near painted mouths, their eyes moving over my muddy boots like dirt was contagious. Vanessa stood near the center of the room with one hand pressed delicately to her chest. The green velvet ring box sat open on a silver table beside her. Empty. Dominic Kane was not beside her. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was Eleanor Kane, seated near the fireplace, watching everything with a stillness that made the rest of the room look foolish. Vanessa turned as I entered, and sadness arranged itself on her face so quickly I almost admired the skill. "I did not want this to become public," she said, loud enough for every guest to hear. "But the cane ring is gone, and she was the last person alone near it." I looked at the box, then at her. I was not alone. Her smile flickered. "Excuse me, you were there. So were your friends." A murmur passed through the room. Vanessa's eyes hardened, but her voice stayed sweet. "Lily, please. Do not make this worse." The way she used my name made it sound borrowed. Like even that did not belong to me. One of the security men said, "We need to check your apron pockets." Heat rose up my neck. Not because I had anything to hide. Because humiliation has its own temperature, and it burns from the inside. "You can look," I said, keeping my hands at my sides. "But I want Mrs. Kane watching." Eleanor's eyes sharpened. Vanessa laughed softly. "How dramatic." I turned to the older woman. "Please." Eleanor rose slowly with the help of her cane. "I will watch." That changed something. The room felt it. The security man hesitated, then nodded. I untied my apron myself because I would not let anyone make a show of pulling it from me. I laid it on the nearest table. One pocket held pruning twine. Another held small shears, clean and closed. A folded work schedule. A pencil. A seed packet. And from the smallest pocket, the guard removed a paper bird, folded from cheap white receipt paper, its wings uneven, a tiny H drawn beneath one side. Someone laughed. Vanessa's friend covered her mouth. "What is that supposed to be?" I reached for it, but the guard held it up like evidence. "It is not yours," I said, quieter now. "It is my sister's. My little sister, Maisie, folded birds when she got scared at the hospital. She left them in my pockets so I could carry brave things into hard places." Vanessa tilted her head. "That is sweet. But sweetness does not explain a missing ring." "I touched your flowers," I said. My voice trembled once, then steadied. "Not your ring." The words landed in the ballroom, small against all that marble, but mine. Vanessa stepped closer. "A girl who needs money sees a ring worth more than her whole life, and we are supposed to believe she simply walked away?" My chest tightened. There it was. The real accusation. Not theft. Poverty. The crime was being close to something expensive while needing something ordinary, like rent, medicine, groceries, time. Before I could answer, a man's voice came from the top of the grand staircase. Low. Calm. Absolute. Ask her how she knew the ring was worth anything. Every face turned upward. Dominic Kane stood beneath the balcony light, one hand resting on the railing, black suit immaculate, gray eyes fixed on Vanessa. The ballroom went so quiet I could hear the fountain running outside. Vanessa's smile froze. Dominic. He descended one step. Then another. Slowly. The box was closed when Miss Harper entered the room. His gaze did not leave Vanessa. "So tell us, Vanessa. Who showed you the ring? Dominic's question did not sound like an accusation. That made it worse. Accusations gave people something to fight. Questions gave truth a place to stand. Vanessa's smile held for 1 second, then 2, then began to look like glass under pressure. Everyone knows the cane ring is valuable, she said. It is an heirloom. Dominic reached the bottom of the staircase. He did not hurry. He did not raise his voice. The ballroom simply adjusted around him, every guest making room before he asked for it. I did not ask if you knew it was valuable, he said. I asked who showed it to you. Vanessa lifted her chin. Your grandmother mentioned it. Eleanor Kane tapped her cane once against the floor. Soft. Final. No, dear. I did not. A murmur moved through the chandeliers and champagne. Vanessa's friends stopped smiling. I stood beside the silver table with my apron lying open like my life had been searched and found embarrassing but not guilty. My sister's paper bird rested near the shears. I wanted to take it back, but my hands stayed still. Pride needed witnesses. Dignity stayed with you. Dominic's eyes shifted to me for the first time since he entered the room. Not long. Not soft. But steady enough to make the floor feel solid again. Miss Harper, he said, did you open the velvet box? No. Did you touch it? No. Did anyone ask you to place the gardenias near it? I looked at Vanessa. She did. Dominic turned back to her. Why? Vanessa laughed once, lightly, trying to pull the room back into her performance. Because the flowers were for the announcement table. This is ridiculous. Then you will not mind answering another question. He looked toward the corner of the ballroom, where a small black dome camera sat above the archway. Why did you enter the east sitting room 11 minutes before Miss Harper? Vanessa's face changed. It was tiny. A blink too late. A breath too shallow. But in that room, tiny was enough. I was preparing, she said. For what? For our announcement. Dominic looked at the empty ring box. The announcement I had not agreed to make. The silence after that sentence was different. It was not gossip silence. It was money silence. The kind rich people make when a contract suddenly looks less secure. Vanessa's father, a broad man with silver hair and a red face, stepped forward from the front row of guests. Kane, this is not the place. Dominic did not look at him. This house is mine. This is exactly the place. My heart beat so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Until that moment, I had thought the party was real, the engagement decided, the world arranged. But Dominic's voice made clear that even marble rooms could be staged, even diamonds could be props, and even women like Vanessa could be waiting for a yes they had already announced to everyone else. Vanessa's eyes flashed. Are you humiliating me over a gardener? No, Dominic said. You did that when you chose her because you thought no one would believe her. Heat rushed behind my eyes. I looked down quickly, not wanting the room to see how hard that sentence hit. Being believed should not feel like being rescued from underwater, but it did. Vanessa's father moved closer to me, his smile thin and controlled. Young lady, perhaps you should step outside while the families discuss this. He reached toward my arm, not rough, not dramatic, just entitled, as if moving me aside required no permission. Before his fingers touched my sleeve, Dominic's voice cut through the space between us. No one touches my bride. The room died. Even the fountain outside seemed to stop breathing. Vanessa turned white. Her father froze. I looked at Dominic so fast the chandelier light broke into pieces. My bride. The words wrapped around me before I could decide whether they were shelter or another cage. Every guest stared. Every whisper waited. Dominic did not look away from Vanessa's father. His expression stayed calm, but the warning in it made the man lower his hand. I should have felt grateful. Part of me did. The frightened part. The part that still remembered being poor in rooms where people could ruin you with one sentence. But another part of me, the part my mother had fed with dignity and my sister had armed with paper birds, stood up inside my chest. I am not your bride, I said. My voice was quiet. Too quiet for anyone but the front rows, until Dominic turned toward me and the room leaned in. I swallowed and said it again, clearer. I am not anyone's bride. His gray eyes met mine. For a second, I saw surprise there. Then something better. Respect. He inclined his head slightly, as if accepting a correction in front of everyone had cost him nothing because my truth mattered more than his pride. "Then no one touches Miss Harper," he said. "And no one removes her from this room until the truth is finished." Eleanor Kane smiled from beside the fireplace. Small. Proud. Vanessa looked at the paper bird, at the open apron, at me standing in muddy boots under a chandelier, and hatred flickered through her polished face. Dominic followed her gaze. "Bring the hallway footage," he said. "Now." The words hallway footage moved through the ballroom like a match lowered near dry silk. No one wanted to look afraid, but fear has small habits. Vanessa's friend stopped touching her necklace. Her father looked toward the camera, then toward Dominic, calculating how much of the evening had already become evidence. I stood beside the table with my apron open, feeling the strange weight of being defended and exposed at the same time. My life had been emptied in front of rich strangers, pocket by pocket, and yet the room was only now beginning to act ashamed. A young staff member hurried in with a tablet, his hands careful, his face colorless. He offered it to Dominic, but Dominic did not take it right away. He looked at me. "Miss Harper, do you want to see it here, or privately with Mrs. Kane present?" The question caught me off guard. Everyone stared. Vanessa looked furious that I had been given a choice instead of an instruction. My throat felt tight, but I lifted my chin. "Here." Dominic nodded once. "Then here." The staff member connected the tablet to the ballroom screen, usually reserved for engagement photos and polished family memories. Instead, the screen filled with the east sitting room hallway, time-stamped 2:57 in the afternoon. Vanessa entered first. Alone. She looked over both shoulders before opening the door. The room was silent except for the soft electrical hum of the screen. On the video, she disappeared inside for nearly 4 minutes. When she came out, her hand was closed around something small, and her expression was not panic. It was satisfaction. Then, 11 minutes later, I appeared on the screen carrying gardenias, boots covered, hands full, moving exactly where I had said I moved. I entered. I left. No ring. No box. No secret glance. Just a girl doing the job she had been called inside to do. The footage ended. No one spoke. Vanessa's father turned red in the face, but his voice came out low. "This is being misunderstood." Eleanor Kane laughed softly from beside the fireplace. "That is what people say when understanding arrives without their permission." Dominic finally looked at Vanessa. "Where's the ring?" She crossed her arms. "I do not have it." "No," Eleanor said, rising slowly. "You do not." Every eye shifted to her. The old woman reached into the small blue handbag resting beside her chair and drew out a ring that caught the chandelier light in a clean white spark. Not loud. Not flashy. Something older than fashion. Something with weight. "I took it before lunch," she said. "Before Miss Whitmore entered the room. Before Lily brought the flowers. Before any of you decided a girl with dirt on her hands would make a convenient thief." The ballroom changed temperature. I felt it in my arms. Vanessa stared at the ring. "You set me up?" Eleanor's face remained gentle, which made her words sharper. "No, dear. I gave character a room and waited to see who walked into it." My breath shook. Dominic was still, but I saw his jaw tighten, not with surprise, with recognition. Perhaps he knew his grandmother well enough to know she had been testing more than Vanessa. She had been testing the house. The guests. Him. Eleanor turned to me and held up the ring. "This ring has belonged to women who survived worse rooms than this one. It is not meant for a hand that points downward at others." Vanessa's perfect mask cracked. "You would choose her over me?" "I would choose kindness over breeding every time." The words struck the room harder than any shout. My eyes burned. I hated that I wanted to cry. I hated that kindness sounded revolutionary in a room full of people who owned entire buildings. Vanessa's father stepped forward. "Mrs. Kane, with respect, this alliance matters." Dominic's voice answered before Eleanor's could. "An alliance that requires humiliating an innocent woman is already too expensive." He turned to the guests, not performing, not pleading, simply ending something that had never deserved ceremony. "There will be no engagement announcement tonight." A collective inhale moved through the ballroom. Vanessa looked at him like he had removed the floor from beneath her. You cannot do that. Dominic's eyes were cold, but his voice was quiet. I just did. Then Eleanor walked toward me. Each tap of her cane sounded against the marble like a small verdict. She stopped in front of my apron, picked up my sister's paper bird, and placed it gently in my palm. You dropped something brave. I closed my fingers around it. Thank you. She studied the little uneven wings, and the softness left her face. Where did you get this? My sister folds them. Your family name is Harper. Yes. Her hand trembled around the cane. Dominic noticed immediately. Grandmother. Eleanor looked from me to him, and the ballroom faded behind her eyes. Find the old garden ledger, she whispered. The one from the summer of the storm. Dominic's expression changed. Why? Eleanor touched the paper bird like it was not paper at all, but a memory that had finally found its way home. Because her father was not just our gardener. For a moment, no one in the ballroom seemed to remember how to breathe. Eleanor Kane's words hung beneath the chandeliers, soft and impossible. Because her father was not just our gardener. I looked down at the paper bird in my hand, its uneven wings folded by my little sister from a hospital receipt, and suddenly it felt heavier than the ring, heavier than the room, heavier than every insult I had swallowed to keep my job. What does that mean? I asked. Eleanor looked at me with a sadness too old to be invented quickly. It means your father saved my grandson's life before this house learned how to thank him. Dominic turned toward her, and for the first time since he had entered the ballroom, the power around him shifted into something raw. Not weakness. Memory without armor. Grandmother. The ledger, she said again. Bring it. No one moved until Dominic looked at the house manager. Now. The woman hurried out. Vanessa stood near her father, white with anger and embarrassment, but the room no longer belonged to her. The guests no longer looked at me like I was dirt on marble. They looked at me like I had become a locked door in the middle of their party, and everyone had just heard something turning behind it. I wanted to leave. I wanted to take my apron, my paper bird, my muddy boots, and run back to the garden where flowers did not pretend to be better than the hands that cared for them. But Eleanor held my gaze. Do you remember the storm of 2009? She asked. I was 7. There was a flood warning. Roads closed. Power down across the north side. Images stirred at the edge of my mind. Rain punching the windows. My mother crying in the kitchen. My father's truck missing from the driveway until morning. I remembered him coming home with his shirt torn at the sleeve and mud up to his knees. He had held me so tightly I could not breathe, then made pancakes as if nothing had happened. He never told me where he was, I whispered. Dominic's eyes moved to mine. I was 12. His voice was low, almost careful. I remember water in the old greenhouse. Broken glass. Your father carrying me out. The room blurred for 1 second. Not because the story was violent, but because it was tender in the worst way. My father had saved a boy who grew into a man the city feared, then vanished from the Kane records as if kindness could be filed under landscaping. Why did he leave? I asked. Eleanor's mouth tightened. Because powerful families are not always grateful in safe ways. Dominic looked away, and that told me more than an explanation. The house manager returned with a leather-bound ledger, dark green, edges worn, the kind of book that had survived secrets by pretending to be boring. She handed it to Eleanor. The old woman opened it with trembling fingers and turned pages filled with dates, plant orders, staff notes, payments. Then she stopped at a folded envelope tucked between July and August. On the front, written in my father's handwriting, was my name. Lily, when dignity costs you work. My throat closed. Eleanor held it out. He left this with me after he resigned. I did not take it right away. My hands were dirty. Stupid thought. Child thought. As if my father had not loved those hands before I knew what they would become. I opened the envelope. Inside was a short letter and a photograph. The photograph showed my father standing in the Kane greenhouse beside a younger Eleanor and a boy with dark hair, pale skin, and storm-gray eyes. Dominic. A bandage wrapped around his arm. My father's hand rested on his shoulder, gentle and steady. The letter shook in my grip as I read. My Lily, if this house ever makes you feel small, remember that flowers grow from the ground, not from chandeliers. I worked here to feed you and your mother. I left because I refused to let my gratitude become obedience. The Canes owe me nothing I did not freely give. But Dominic owes himself the truth. If he becomes a man of power, I pray he learns power is not proven by whom he can command, but by whom he refuses to let be humiliated. I covered my mouth. The ballroom was silent enough to hear the paper tremble. Dominic stepped closer, but stopped before he reached me. May I see it? The question mattered. After everything, it mattered. I handed him the letter. He read it once. His face did not change much, but his eyes did. Something old opened there. Something ashamed and grateful and awake. Vanessa gave a brittle laugh. How touching. Are we all supposed to believe this gardener's daughter is suddenly important because of one storm? Dominic folded the letter carefully and returned it to me. Then he looked at her, and the room seemed to lose 10 degrees. No, he said. She was important before I knew her name. Vanessa's laugh died before it reached anyone willing to catch it. Dominic's words had changed the room, but they had also changed me, and I did not know what to do with that. She was important before I knew her name. No one had ever said something like that about me in a room like this. Not because I had saved someone. Not because I had worked hard. Not because I was useful. Simply because I was a person standing where others wanted me smaller. My father's letter pressed against my palm, warm now from my skin. I wanted to believe the moment was enough, that truth once spoken could stay spoken, but Vanessa was not finished. People like her never lost gracefully. They only searched for a sharper angle. This is sentimental theater, she said, turning toward the guests as if they were still hers. A gardener's old letter, a grandmother's mood, and Dominic pretending this is about justice when everyone knows what is really happening. Her eyes slid to me. He is embarrassing my family because he has developed a fascination with the help. The word help hit the marble and spread. I felt several guests look away. Not because they disagreed. Because they were ashamed of recognizing their own thoughts in her mouth. Dominic took one step forward, but I lifted my hand. I did not plan it. I only knew that if he answered every insult for me, the room would leave believing his power was the reason I had a voice. No, I said. Vanessa blinked. Excuse me. I stepped away from the table, away from my open apron and the ring box and the evidence of a life they thought could be searched without consequence. My boots left faint damp marks on the marble. I saw them and kept walking. You do not get to make my dignity sound like his weakness. My voice was not loud, but the ballroom had learned to listen. I am the help. I help roses survive heat. I help your staff fix the flowers you pose beside. I helped Mrs. Kane when she was shaking in the sun, before I knew her name, before I knew anyone would care. Eleanor's eyes shone, but she did not interrupt. Dominic stood still, and that gave me room. You call me garden girl like it is an insult, I continued. But gardens tell the truth faster than people. Neglect shows. Poison shows. Roots know when the soil is wrong. Vanessa's face tightened. Her father moved closer to her, not protective now, strategic. Young lady, he said, you are overstepping. I looked at him. No, sir. I am standing where your daughter dragged me. The old Lily would have apologized for the sharpness. The old Lily would have worried about losing the job, losing the paycheck, losing the fragile shelf between my mother's prescriptions and the end of the month. But my father's handwriting was in my hand, and my sister's paper bird was in my pocket, and something in me had finally understood that survival was not the same as silence. Vanessa's father looked toward Dominic. Control your employee. Dominic's eyes stayed on me. She is not mine to control. The sentence landed softer than his warning, but deeper. I turned slightly and met his gaze. For 1 second, the room disappeared around the edges. Not romance. Not yet. Recognition. A man who had almost used a title to shield me now choosing not to use ownership at all. I looked back at Vanessa. You wanted me blamed because I was easy. Poor enough to doubt. Quiet enough to corner. Dirty enough for your guests to believe I had touched something clean and ruined it. Vanessa said nothing. Her silence was not surrender. It was calculation losing speed. Eleanor lifted the cane ring, still bright between her fingers. This ring will not go to a woman who mistakes cruelty for class. Then she turned to Dominic. And it will not go to a man who confuses protection with possession. Dominic accepted the rebuke with a slight bow of his head. Understood. My breath caught at that. Understood. Not argued. Not defended. Understood. Vanessa stared between them, finally realizing the alliance had collapsed in front of everyone, not because I had power, but because her contempt had become too visible to hide under diamonds. She stepped toward me, her voice low enough that only the front of the room heard. You think this makes you one of them? I touched the paper bird inside my pocket. No, I looked at the white roses beyond the glass doors, bending lightly in the afternoon wind. That is the point. The first flash came from a guest's phone before anyone could stop it. Then another. Dominic looked toward security. No recordings of Miss Harper are to leave this house without her consent. I turned to him quickly. He added, before I could correct him, that is a request to the room. Not a decision for her. Then he looked at me. Your choice. It was strange how those two words could feel larger than a mansion. I looked at the guests holding their phones, at Vanessa trembling with fury, at Eleanor standing with a ring that had become a verdict. Let them remember, I said. But they do not get my face for gossip. Dominic nodded to security, and they lowered the phones without touching anyone. Clean. Quiet. Controlled. For the first time that day, power did not feel like a hand around my throat. It felt like a door being held open while I decided whether to walk through it. The room waited for me to become grateful, and that was the moment I knew I had to leave it. Not because Dominic had failed me. In that strange, impossible hour, he had done more than most powerful men would ever do. He had believed me before belief was convenient. He had turned evidence toward the people who tried to bury me beneath shame. He had corrected himself when I refused the word bride. But a ballroom is still a ballroom, even when the chandelier light falls kindly. Marble still remembers who has been allowed to stand on it and who has been told to clean it. I picked up my apron from the table and tied it around my waist with slow fingers. The gesture confused people more than any speech could have. They expected me to accept a new role, maybe a better one, maybe one with softer chairs and cleaner hands. Instead, I put the dirt back where they could see it. Eleanor watched me with quiet approval. Vanessa watched me like I had stolen an ending she had paid for in advance. Dominic simply waited. I am going back to the garden, I said. The house manager stepped forward, anxious. Miss Harper, after everything, perhaps you should take the rest of the day. I looked at her. The roses still need water. A few guests shifted, uncomfortable with the ordinary surviving beside the dramatic. That was fine. Ordinary had fed my family. Ordinary had paid for medicine. Ordinary had taught me that roots do not care who applauds. I turned toward Eleanor. Thank you for telling the truth. Her fingers tightened around the cane ring. Thank you for reminding this house what truth looks like without polish. I did not know how to answer that, so I nodded. When I passed Dominic, he did not stop me. He did not call my name across the room. He walked beside me only after I reached the open terrace doors, leaving enough space between us for the air to prove I was not being escorted out of my own decision. Outside, the heat had softened. Clouds gathered over the west lawn, turning the white tents gray at the edges. The garden smelled of damp soil, cut stems, and approaching rain. My bucket still lay near the rose bed where I had dropped it earlier. Water spilled into the grass, flowers scattered like small white apologies. I knelt and began gathering them. Dominic stopped several feet away. Miss Harper. I kept my eyes on the roses. Lily. A pause. Lily. My name sounded different in his voice when he was not using it to answer a room. I owe you an apology. I picked up a broken stem. For calling me your bride? Yes. You said it to stop a man from touching me. That does not make it mine to say. My hands stilled. The answer was better than I wanted it to be. Behind us, through the glass, the party continued to collapse in quiet pieces. Vanessa's family leaving. Guests whispering. Staff removing champagne no one knew how to drink anymore. My father wrote that you owed yourself the truth, I said. Do you know what that means? Dominic looked toward the old greenhouse beyond the hedges. I know what I hoped it did not mean. Which is that becoming feared was easier than becoming honest. The clouds darkened. A breeze moved through the roses, lifting loose strands of hair from my neck. I stood, holding the damaged flowers against my apron. Then start with this. I am not a debt your family has to repay. He met my eyes. I know. I am not a symbol of your redemption. I know. And I am not stepping into Vanessa's empty place just because your grandmother likes me and your guests feel guilty. His mouth almost softened. Almost. I know that too. The first raindrop landed on the back of my hand. Then another. I looked up as the sky opened gently, not a storm, just a summer rain washing heat from the stones. Dominic removed his black jacket and held it out, not over me, not around me, only offered. I looked at it. Then at him. You keep it, I said. I am not afraid of rain. For the first time, I saw something like a smile in his eyes. No, he said quietly. I do not think you are. I carried the broken roses to the compost bin and laid them down. Not everything beautiful could be saved by being placed in water. Some things had to return to the ground and become something honest again. Rain made the garden quieter, not empty. It softened the voices behind the glass doors until the ballroom became a painting of people pretending they had not watched themselves choose the wrong side. I worked because my hands needed something true to do. I trimmed damaged stems. I checked the ties on the climbing roses. I moved the young hydrangeas beneath the awning before their leaves could bruise. Dominic stayed near the edge of the path for a while, his jacket folded over one arm, his black shirt darkening at the shoulders where the rain touched him. He did not offer to help until I handed him a watering can and pointed toward the west bed. Slow pour, I said. At the roots. Not the petals. He looked at the can like no one had ever given him such a simple weapon against harm. Then he did exactly as I told him. That should not have moved me. A man watering roses was not a miracle. But powerful men often hate being instructed by women they cannot categorize, and Dominic Kane obeyed without making obedience look like generosity. We worked in silence until the sky cleared enough for evening light to slip through the clouds. Then Eleanor appeared on the terrace, wrapped in a cream shawl, the cane ring still in her hand. Dominic, she called softly. The Whitmores have left. He set the watering can down. Good. Vanessa left a message with the staff. Eleanor's eyes moved to me, regret crossing her face. She intends to challenge the footage. She says the gardener was planted to embarrass her family. I laughed before I could stop myself. Not because it was funny. Because the rich could turn even a girl with dirt under her nails into a conspiracy if the alternative was admitting cruelty. Dominic's expression hardened. She will not touch Lily's job, reputation, or family. I held up one hand. Do not make promises over me. He stopped at once. Eleanor watched that, and something like approval warmed her tired eyes. Then allow me, she said. This house owes you wages for every hour you were pulled from work, a written statement clearing your name, and an apology in front of the staff. I wiped rain from my cheek with my wrist. The statement matters. The apology can stay where it is if it only comes because the room got caught. Eleanor nodded slowly. Your father said things like that. My chest tightened. You knew him well? Well enough to know he never bent the wrong way. She stepped off the terrace with Dominic's help but released his arm as soon as she reached the path. Pride, I realized, ran in all kinds of families. She came toward me and opened her palm. The ring sat there, bright and old. This was never meant for Vanessa, she said. I let the room believe it because I needed Dominic to see what kind of alliance he was being pushed toward. Dominic looked at her sharply. You tested me. Yes. You could have told me. Would you have listened before the girl was humiliated? The question cut clean. Dominic did not answer. Eleanor's face softened, but only a little. Power makes men trust their own judgment too much. Even good intentions become dangerous when no one is allowed to correct them. I looked at Dominic then. He took it. All of it. The rebuke, the lesson, the shame. He did not hide behind being feared. Eleanor turned back to me. Your father left one more thing. She reached into her shawl pocket and pulled out a small brass tag on a faded green ribbon. Harper and Son Landscaping, Chicago. The letters were worn almost smooth. My knees went weak before I touched it. That was on his truck. He left it the night of the storm, she said. He told me if his daughter ever came to this garden, I should give it back and tell her he did not leave because he was ashamed. He left because he wanted her far from men who confuse gratitude with ownership. I took the tag with both hands. Suddenly the garden smelled like my childhood, wet grass, gasoline, my father's work gloves drying by the back door. I had spent years thinking he disappeared from important rooms because men like him were forgettable. But he had walked out with his dignity intact, and somehow, 24-year-old me had walked back in carrying the same inheritance. Dominic spoke quietly. Lily, I am sorry my house kept your father's truth in a ledger instead of honoring it in daylight. I looked at the brass tag, then at him. Do not apologize with words if you can repair with actions. Tell me where to begin. I almost said you should already know. Then I saw his hands, damp from watering roses badly but carefully, and I thought maybe honest beginnings were rarely elegant. Start with my mother, I said. Not money handed down like charity. A proper review of every benefit my father was denied when he resigned after saving you. Wages, insurance, records. If this house erased him, put him back in writing. Dominic's eyes changed. Done. Not done, I said. Started. The corner of his mouth softened. Started. Eleanor smiled. The evening sun broke fully through the clouds then, lighting the white roses until each one looked edged in fire. I closed my fingers around my father's brass tag and understood that justice did not always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it came as a name restored, a record corrected, and a powerful man learning to stand still while a garden girl told him where the roots had been cut. The next morning, Kane Manor looked too clean for what had happened inside it. Sunlight slid over the marble terrace, the white tents were gone, and the garden had been combed back into elegance by people who knew how to erase evidence of embarrassment. But the roses remembered. I saw it in the bent stems near the east path, in the trampled grass beside the fountain, in the faint mark where my bucket had fallen. Gardens never lied. They only waited for someone patient enough to read the damage. I arrived at 7 with my hair braided, my work dress clean, and my father's brass tag tied inside my apron pocket. Part of me expected the gate code not to work. Part of me expected a polite email saying my services were no longer required. Instead, the gate opened, and the first person I saw was Dominic Kane standing beside the old greenhouse with rolled-up sleeves and a stack of files in his hand. He looked wrong in the morning. Less like a warning. More like a man who had not slept because the past had finally learned his address. You are early, he said. So are you. I had records pulled. He lifted the files. Payroll, insurance, resignation paperwork, incident reports from the storm. I stopped a few feet away. That was fast. Not fast enough. His answer was quiet. No performance. No expensive apology dressed as efficiency. Just a fact he did not like about himself. I wanted to stay guarded. I needed to. Men like Dominic could make repair look beautiful while still keeping the tools in their own hands. Did you find my father? I asked. He opened the top folder and handed me a copy, not the original, as if he knew better than to ask me to trust before I had proof. The page was dated August 3, 2009. My father's name sat under employee separation. Reason listed: voluntary resignation. Benefits: forfeited. Final compensation: standard 2 weeks. My throat tightened. That is a lie. Yes. Dominic pulled another page free. This one had handwritten notes in the margin, Eleanor's old initials at the bottom. Emergency response during flood. Unrecorded injury. Saved minor family member. Recommended lifetime medical support and full pension equivalent. Denied by board counsel. I read the words 3 times. Denied. Such a small word for what it had cost us. My mother working double shifts. Me learning which prescriptions could wait 2 days. My sister counting coins in a coffee mug and calling it the Brave Fund. Who denied it? Dominic's face hardened. My uncle and 2 board attorneys. One is retired. One still works for the Whitmore family. Vanessa's name did not enter the garden, but its shadow did. I folded the paper carefully because rage needed manners if it wanted to become action. And now? Now I restore it publicly through the estate, with interest, legal correction, and a formal record of what he did. I looked at him. Publicly? You said put him back in writing. He held my gaze. I heard you. That sentence should not have mattered as much as it did. I had spent most of my life being heard only after repeating myself enough to sound difficult. Dominic heard once, and the danger in that was not fear. It was hope. I looked toward the greenhouse. Its glass panes caught the sun in broken squares. Why here? Because this is where he carried me out. We walked to the old greenhouse in silence. Inside, the air smelled of moss, warm soil, and metal. Several panes had been replaced over the years, but one corner still held a scar in the frame where storm damage had twisted the structure. Dominic touched it with 2 fingers. I remembered his voice before I remembered his face, he said. He told me to stay awake by naming flowers. I almost smiled through the ache. That sounds like him. I only knew 3. Roses, probably. Roses. Lilies. He looked at me then. And marigolds. My father used to plant marigolds beside our porch because he said they kept pests away and made ugly days look determined. I turned before Dominic could see my eyes fill. On the potting table lay a tray of white lily bulbs, fresh, pale, waiting. Beside them sat a small wooden sign painted by hand, Harper Memorial Garden. My breath stopped. No, Dominic went still. No, I faced him. You do not get to name a garden after my father without asking my mother. Without asking us. Do you understand? Honoring someone is not the same as arranging them beautifully. The silence that followed was clean and sharp. Then Dominic picked up the wooden sign and turned it face down. You are right. No defense. No wounded pride. Just the sign lowered. My anger loosened, confused by having nowhere to strike. He looked at the bulbs. Then we ask. I breathed slowly. Outside, the roses moved in the light. My mother will not come here if she feels summoned. Then I will go to her. No, his eyes returned to mine. I held his gaze. You will write first. You will explain. You will ask whether she is willing to speak. And you will accept no as a complete answer. Dominic nodded. Started, he said. Not done. Started. I looked at the turned-down sign, the files, the bulbs, the man who could command rooms but was learning how not to command grief. For the first time, I let myself believe my father's truth might grow here, not because Dominic planted it, but because he was finally willing to ask where the roots belonged. Dominic wrote the letter that afternoon at the old greenhouse table, not from his office, not beneath a portrait, not behind a desk large enough to make apology feel official. He stood while he wrote, sleeves still rolled, black pen moving slowly across cream paper as if every sentence had to pass through more than his hand before it deserved to exist. I worked nearby, trimming dead leaves from the lilies, pretending not to watch him choose humility word by word. Dear Mrs. Harper, he began, then stopped. Too formal, he asked. I did not look up. My mother trusts formal more than charming. He nodded and kept it. The letter took him 40 minutes. He did not mention generosity. He did not mention gratitude like it was a gift he had decided to bestow. He wrote the facts. The storm. My father's documented action. The denial of benefits. The correction now being prepared. He wrote that she owed the Kane family nothing, that any meeting would happen only if she wanted it, and that no answer would be treated as an answer. When he finished, he handed it to me without sealing the envelope. Read it. You trust me to edit you? I trust you to know where I am still making myself comfortable. That was the problem with Dominic Kane. Sometimes he said things that made my defenses step back before I was ready. I read the letter twice. Only one line stopped me. I regret that my family failed to recognize your husband's sacrifice. I crossed out sacrifice and wrote work. Dominic watched the change. Work. My father did not wake up that day hoping to become a beautiful story for rich people. He had a job. He did it when the job became dangerous and everyone else looked away. Call it work. Work deserves records. Sacrifice gets turned into speeches. Dominic took the paper, read the corrected sentence, and rewrote it cleanly on a new page. No argument. No wounded pride. Just learning. At 5, I brought the letter home. My mother sat at our kitchen table in Cicero with her oxygen tube resting beneath her nose, a basket of folded laundry at her side, and Maisie's paper birds lined across the windowsill, like a flock waiting for permission to leave. She looked older than she had that morning, or maybe I was finally seeing how much worry had carved into her while I was busy surviving it. "You were late," she said. Then she saw my face. "Lily." I set my bag down and took out the letter, the copies of the payroll records, and the brass tag from my father's truck. My mother touched the tag first. Not the papers. Not the envelope. The tag. Her fingers closed around it, and the sound she made was so small I almost wished Dominic had never found it. Some grief does not want justice at first. It wants the person back. Maisie came in from the hallway, thin and bright-eyed at 16, with a paper bird half folded between her fingers. What happened? I told them everything in the plainest words I could find. No drama. No chandeliers. No mafia boss becoming a myth in our kitchen. Just the truth. The accusation. The footage. Eleanor. The ledger. My father's letter. Dominic's promise to start. My mother listened without interrupting until I reached the part about the denied benefits. Then she closed her eyes. "I knew," she whispered. My heart stopped. "You knew?" "I knew something was wrong. Your father came home after the storm and said we were leaving the Kane accounts behind. He said gratitude from powerful people always arrived with strings. A month later, a lawyer sent papers. Your father refused to sign them." "What papers?" Her hand trembled over the brass tag. "A settlement. Quiet money. Less than what they owed. Enough to make us stop asking." Maisie sat down slowly. "Why did he refuse?" My mother looked at both of us, tired and proud and broken in the same breath. "Because the document said he had abandoned his post during emergency conditions. Your father said no amount of money was worth letting his daughters inherit that lie." The kitchen went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I thought about the marble ballroom, Vanessa's clean hands, Dominic's turned-down garden sign, and my father choosing poverty over a false sentence. My mother opened Dominic's letter and read it. Once. Twice. Then she folded it with careful hands. "He asks before coming?" "Yes." "And he will accept no?" "Yes." She looked at me. "Do you believe him?" I thought of the ballroom. The rain. The watering can. The wooden sign turned face down without argument. "I believe he is trying to become the kind of man my father hoped he could be." Maisie finished folding her paper bird and set it beside the brass tag. "Then maybe we do not say no forever," she said. My mother smiled sadly. "Not forever. But not today." I nodded, and for once, no one in the room tried to rush healing, because repair had finally knocked instead of entering without permission. By the third day, the story had already grown teeth. It moved through staff texts, society pages, anonymous posts, and quiet phone calls made by people who had smiled in Dominic Kane's ballroom while watching a garden girl get searched. Vanessa Whitmore's family released a statement about misunderstanding, emotional pressure, and unfortunate confusion during a private celebration. They did not use my name. That was supposed to be mercy. It felt more like strategy. Dominic's statement came 2 hours later, signed by his estate office and delivered to every staff member before it reached the press. It said Lily Harper had been falsely accused. It said video evidence cleared her completely. It said the Kane estate was opening an independent review of former employee records, including the employment and denied benefits of Daniel Harper. My father's name in public writing did something to me I did not expect. It did not heal the wound. It gave the wound a witness. I read the statement on my phone while standing in my mother's kitchen, the morning light falling across the table where Bill's, pill bottles, and Maisie's paper birds had always lived together like one strange family. My mother read it once and set the phone down. "He used your father's full name," she said. "Yes. Not just former gardener." No, her eyes filled, but she nodded. "Good." That was all. Good. From my mother, that word carried more weight than applause. I returned to Kane Manor that afternoon because the roses did not care about scandal, and, honestly, neither did the weeds. The house felt different when I walked through the side gate. Staff members looked at me, then looked away, then looked back with the awkward respect of people trying to unlearn what they had been taught to assume. The house manager stopped me near the tool shed. Her eyes were red. "Miss Harper, I owe you an apology." I waited. Not cruelly. Carefully. I should have questioned the accusation before bringing security. Her voice trembled. "I am sorry. I thought about all the apologies women like me are expected to accept quickly so everyone else can feel clean again. Then I thought about my mother saying not today." "Thank you for saying it," I replied. "I am not ready to make you feel better about it." She lowered her head. "I understand." Maybe she did. Maybe she would later. That was not mine to manage. In the garden, Dominic was already there, but this time he was not waiting where I had to see him. He was at the far west bed, kneeling in the dirt beside a row of damaged lilies, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, a book on basic transplanting open beside him. The sight almost made me laugh. Not because he looked ridiculous, though he did. Because he looked willing. "You are holding the trowel wrong," I said. He looked up. There was soil on one cuff. "I suspected as much." "Then why are you doing it?" "Because your father's records will take lawyers." This seemed like something I could start with my own hands. I looked at the lilies. 3 were too close together. One root ball was exposed. The spacing was terrible. The intention was not. I knelt beside him and took the trowel. First rule. Roots need room. His eyes stayed on the dirt. I am learning that. We worked for nearly an hour without speaking much. I showed him how to loosen soil without tearing the fine roots, how to press earth firmly but not hard, how to water slowly until the ground accepted it instead of drowning. It should have felt strange, teaching a mafia boss how to be gentle with living things. Instead, it felt like the only lesson that mattered. Near sunset, Eleanor joined us in the garden with a folded paper in her hand. "Your mother sent a reply," she said. My heart jumped. Dominic did not reach for it. He looked at me first. I took the letter and opened it. My mother's handwriting was small and neat. "Mr. Kane, my husband does not need a garden named after him to become honorable. He already was. If you wish to repair what was denied, begin with the records, the benefits, and the truth. After that, perhaps we will discuss flowers." I smiled before the tears came. Dominic read the letter only after I handed it to him. When he finished, he folded it carefully, like something sacred. "She is right," he said. "Yes," I replied. He looked at the newly planted lilies, then at me. "Then records first. Flowers after permission." The evening wind moved through the roses. For the first time, Kane Manor did not feel like a house trying to swallow my name. It felt like ground. Complicated ground. Damaged ground. But ground that could still be turned, if the hands touching it were finally honest enough to start where the roots were. 3 weeks after the Whitmore party collapsed, the first corrected record arrived in my mother's mailbox. It came in a thick white envelope with the Kane estate seal on the corner and my father's full name printed on the first page like it had always deserved to be there. Daniel Harper. Emergency service during the 2009 storm. Injury documented. Benefits restored. Compensation recalculated. Public acknowledgement approved. My mother read every line at the kitchen table without crying until she reached the part that said his departure had been misclassified. Misclassified. Such a clean word for a dirty thing. She pressed her fingers to my father's brass tag and whispered, "They put him back." Maisie folded a paper bird from the envelope flap and placed it beside the document. "He was never gone," she said. "They just had bad filing." My mother laughed then, soft and broken and alive, and that sound did more for me than any apology from Kane Manor ever could. By autumn, the garden changed. Not all at once. Honest things rarely do. The west bed was replanted with my mother's permission, not as a memorial, but as a working garden for the staff and their families. Marigolds for my father. Lilies for me. Paper white roses for Eleanor, who insisted old women deserved flowers that looked innocent and survived frost anyway. There was no bronze plaque at the entrance. My mother said plaques made grief look finished. Instead, Dominic had a simple wooden sign placed near the tool shed, exactly where she agreed it belonged, Harper Family Garden, tended by permission. Those last 3 words were mine. Tended by permission. They mattered. Vanessa Whitmore disappeared from our circle of weather, though her family's statement changed twice and then went quiet. The footage never became a public spectacle because I chose not to let my humiliation become entertainment. But inside the circles that had once protected her, everyone knew. Sometimes that was enough. Dominic kept his distance at first. Not cold. Not absent. Careful. He sent documents through attorneys, not flowers. He asked before visiting my mother. He sat at our kitchen table in a plain black coat and listened while she told him stories about my father that did not flatter the Kane family or soften the past. He did not correct her. He did not defend the dead men who had signed the wrong papers. When Maisie taught him how to fold a paper bird, he failed so badly she told him his bird looked like a tired napkin. He kept it anyway. The first time he asked me to dinner, he did it beside the compost bin while I was turning soil. Not a gala, he said. Not my house. Not anywhere people will stare. I leaned on the shovel. Where then? A diner. Public. Terrible coffee. You choose the time. You drive yourself. You leave whenever you want. I tried not to smile. That is the least romantic invitation I have ever heard. His eyes warmed. I am improving. Slowly. Roots need room. He said it seriously enough that my heart forgot how to be guarded for one beat. We went the next Friday to a diner off Route 83, where the waitress called everyone honey and the coffee tasted like burnt decisions. Dominic wore a gray sweater instead of a suit. I wore jeans with soil still under one fingernail because I had stopped trying to become clean enough for other people's comfort. We talked about ordinary things first. Maisie's college plans. My mother's stubborn refusal to rest. Eleanor's new habit of supervising the garden from the terrace with a lemonade and too many opinions. Then, near closing, Dominic placed something small on the table between us. Not a ring. Not a promise dressed as jewelry. A folded paper bird. White. Crooked. Better than before. For your sister, he said. Proof of progress. I picked it up and turned it over. On one wing, in careful handwriting, he had written, "Not mine to hold." Beside it, on the other wing, "Free to stay." I looked at him across the chipped diner table, this man with a name people still whispered, this man who had once used power like a wall and was learning to use it like shelter with a door. "Dominic," I said, "I am still the garden girl." He nodded. "I know. That is not the small part of me. I know that too." Outside, cars moved through the wet parking lot, their headlights sliding over the window glass like slow stars. I thought about Vanessa saying just the garden girl, about my father choosing truth over comfort, about my mother saying not today until repair learned patience. I thought about roses growing from dirt, not chandeliers. Then I reached across the table and placed the paper bird back in Dominic's palm. "Keep practicing," I said. His fingers closed around it carefully, not trapping, only holding what had been freely returned. Real love, I learned, does not lift you out of the garden to prove you are worthy of the house. It kneels beside you in the dirt, asks where the roots belong, and waits for permission to grow.